In the name of God, in this session, we will read about the science of Arabic lexicography. In the previous session, we read about lexicography, but here we want to read about the science of Arabic lexicography, a survey of its emergence and evolution. At first I want to read it line by line, and I explain the important matter. The roof of everything starts from the root. The roof of everything starts from the root. When the root is properly and effectively nurtured, definitely the root spread its sprout magnificency. On the other hand, the root is nowhere to be found if it is uncared for. The same thing happened with regards to Arabic lexicography, which its pioneer Al-Khalil took a great pain in leaving a word on which other lexicographers brought a leaf. This paper attempts to examine the ways and manners through which the science of Arabic lexicography had started. It begins with an introduction, a sketchy overview of the origin and development of Arabic lexicography in Arab world. Effort is made to review some methods adopted in the Arabic lexical works. This is followed by having a look at Arabic lexicography as it affects neighboring areas, and subsequently discussed on European lexicon. Afterwards, the paper ends with conclusion. The paper is based mainly on data and information collected from various scholars. Other materials were also obtained from private libraries to form the database. The study revealed that there are three main types of lexicographical books: the dictionary, the general classified vocabulary, and the short specialist vocabulary. Arabs excelled in all three. Arabic bilingual dictionaries were rare in Arab world, the chief exception being Al-Zamakhshari's Arabic-Persian dictionary. Okay, here in the abstract we see an introduction about this article. We see the frame of this article, and here told us about the matter which will be discussed in this article. Introduction. As you know, in each abstract we should refer to the subject as a whole. We should refer to the research method, the methodology of the paper, the important conclusion, and the problem of this article. Soon after the promulgation of Islam and the mass conversion of non-Arabs to the new religion, the need was felt for a systematic study of the Arabic language. As you know, in the introduction it gives us some information about the subject, about the title of this article. To maintain a correct reading and interpretation of the Qurans, any mistake in reading it has always been regarded as a sin by both Arab and non-Arab Muslims, and to make it easy for non-Arab Muslims to learn Arabic and become fully assimilated into the new Ummah. The need was immediately satisfied by the appearance of scholars devoted to the systematic observation, collection, and registration of the linguistic phenomena in Arabic under various levels. According to Ibn Khaldun, the classical Arabic language in which the Qurans had been revealed was subjected to two types of corruption as a result of the spread of Islam amongst non-Arabs. 1. Corruption of the forms of words, which gave rise to the science of Nahw, which is grammar. Corruption of the signification of words, which gave rise to science of lexicography. Thus, the twin branches of linguistic study in Arabic were born. As far as lexicography is concerned, there have been various attempts to make relatively small collection of rare words or write short monographs on some types of special vocabulary. Before the magnificent attempts of the genius Arab Basran al-Khalil to encompass all the roots, not the derivatives, of the language in one single lexicon called al-Ain, after the Arabic letter Ain, with which the lexicon begins. Darwish states that the analytical and mathematical mentality of al-Khalil brought him to the conclusion that no number of these monographs would suffice to comprehend all the roots in the language. Besides, such monographs are bound to be full of repetitions. Al-Khalil therefore set his mind to invent a system which would be both comprehensive and free from repetition. He came out successful and gave us Kitab al-Ain, which to us John Haywood's book is a landmark not only of Arabic lexicography but in the history of world lexicography. Okay, and here we just read the introduction about the Arabic language concerning to the lexicography. The important point in this paragraph just is that Al-Khalil is the first person who wanted to create a lexicography. Just this point is important here in these lines, in these three paragraphs. The important point is that Al-Khalil is the first person who want to try create a lexicography, which he start its work by the single lexicon which called al-Ain. The purpose of Al-Khalil's work, you should, in your summarization, you should just refer to the Al-Khalil and his book. The purpose of Al-Khalil work, as stated in the introduction, was that through it, the Arabs should be known by means of their poetry, proverbs, and discourse in an unequivocal manner. As for the method followed, the introduction also states that he compiled it on the letters of Alif, Ba, Ta, containing what the Arabs spoke in the range of their speech and expression without deviating from that at all. Here you can see the goal of Al-Khalil for preparing such a lexicography. The idea upon which Al-Khalil based his comprehensive non-repetitive lexicon is sometimes called the theory of roots, sometimes the permutative, and sometimes the anagrammatical arrangement. To explain it in its simplest form, let us take a common tri-consonantal Arabic root, R, K, B. By permutation, these three radical theoretically can produce six forms: RKB, RBK, BRK, BKR, KRB, KBR. Ibn Durayd Explaining this, draws a triangle with a radical letter at each corner, which you can see it in this way. Please pay attention to this. Okay. And we have here K, B, R, and K, B, R, which we combine them in this way, in 6 form. One can then start from any corner and proceed in either of the two directions, forming in the meantime the theoretical 6 anagram of these 3 radicals. Al-Khalil took each one of the Arabic letters of the alphabet, made it a title of a chapter recording in it all the roots in use wherein the letter in question forms a radical. This meant that as the lexicon progressed, the chapters became increasingly shorter. Each chapter was quantitatively subdivided into bilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral, and quinquilateral roots. Within these subsection roots were dealt with anagrammatically all permutation of any given group of radicals being grouped together. Once a root was treated in a connection with one of its radicals, it would not come up again in connection with the other. When it came to the alphabetic order of the chapters, Al-Khalil didn't follow either the Semitic order or the conventional Arabic order, which you can see this order in the parentheses of the alphabet. Instead, he introduced a new order, laryngeal, and ending with the he introduced a new order based on the phonetic consideration, arranging the letters according to their point of articulation, beginning with the ways with the laryngeal and ending with the labials, like here. He then added the semi-vowel and the weak letters, thus his order runs in this way. We have the laryngeal consonant he, 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 q, q, k, sh, d, s, s, z, t, d, t, z, d, t, which they are separated, r, l, n, f, b, m, and w, y. Here you can see in this paragraph we read about the characteristics of Al-Khalil work. You should know you can be able to describe his work by reading this paragraph. Therefore, in the previous paragraph, the only matter which was important was that Al-Khalil was the first person who created a lexicography in Arabic, which it was called as Al-Ain. And here you can see in this paragraph the characteristics of Al-Khalil work, and here you can see it. We keep the characteristics of that book in this paragraph. You should know this paragraph, and you should mention these characteristics in your summarization. Henceforth, we shall refer to this entire phonetic, quantitative, anagrammatical arrangement simply as Al-Khalil's arrangement. Here we call such an arrangement as Al-Khalil arrangement, which he created his work based on the phonetic consideration, and you can see that they beginning with laryngeal and ending with the labial. Cumbersome or lexicon to use as all of centuries, and in spite of lexicon to use on al-ain was it has impressed a successive generation so much that it has been rather slavishly imitated for a number of centuries. And in spite of the fact that easier arrangements had in the meantime been established, the major lexical works to follow al-Khalil's arrangement with little or modification are, okay, here we can see the lexical works which follow the al-Khalil arrangement. You should know this work. Kitab al-Jamhara of Ibn Durayd, Kitab al-Tahdib of al-Ajari, Kitab al-Bari of al-Aqil, al-Qalil, Kitab Mukhtasar al-Ain of al-Zubaydi, and Kitab al-Muhkam of Ibn Sida. This lexical work followed al-Khalil's arrangement for their lexical works. You should know these works and you should mention them in your summarization. History of lexicography. Here we, as you know, in the previous session we say something about lexicography, but here we want to explain it briefly. The history of lexicography is one of trial and error, but lexicon is as old as writing itself. The Sumerians' signs on clay tablets constitute perhaps the world's first classified vocabularies. The Assyrians coming to Babylon simulated lexicography there. You should know the history of lexicography in brief. In fact, the germ of the dictionary idea evolved in Assyria nearly 1,000 years before Christ. The first Chinese essay in lexicography may be as old as the Assyrians, but a systematic definition of a large number of characters was the Chinese Ersia, which may be dated back to between 200 BC and the birth of Christ. It was in reality classified vocabulary. The earliest dictionary extant is Hesu Shen's. Shuwen, also in China's written in the 1st century AD, it sets out canonical treatises, and so has a parallel with early Arabic lexicography, which was an aid to understanding of Quran and Hadith. Later, the Chinese type of lexicography included characters grouped phonetically irrespective of their varied written forms. The Buddhist monks must have influenced them in the way that the Indian language influenced al-Khalil. At the birth of Christ, grammar lexicography came into prominence in both Sanskrit and Greek. In Greece, Aristarchus of Samothrace was the first to divide words into 8 parts based on philosophical ideas. This was to have later effects on Latin and Arabic. The Romans took their linguistic idea from the Greeks, but judging by extant works, they didn't compile alphabetical dictionaries. The greatest monument in Latin lexicography is Varius De Lingua Latina, which is discussion of words, not dictionary. They also lived to 27 BC. Okay, here you can see the history of lexicography, and you should know it and you should mention it in brief. Meaning of Arabic lexicography: Talif al-Mu'ajim al-Arabiyyah, the equivalent of which in English is Arabic lexicography, takes its root from ajama, which means to make clear. It is defined as the art or practice of writing or compilation of Arabic lexicon or dictionaries. The key word here, which is an equivocal word having double meaning. One of such meaning is awdaha, as the following sentence makes use of it. Ajama al-rajul al-kalam, the man explained the matter, or the man spoke clearly. In other sense, it could mean abhama. In a similar sentence cited above would give us the man spoke incorrectly. The word a'jama and the etymological pattern of af'ala could be used and comprehended positively and at the same time negatively based on the context of its usage. With this aim in view, we shall confine ourselves to the positive usage of the word, which convinces us to agree that al-mu'ajim lexicon functions as. Here you are the student of Arabic language and you can read it better than me. Removal of obscurities from an explanation of ambiguities in words. Besides the fact that it is defined as a comprehensive book comprising the world of a language based on a specific arrangement, but you are able to read the Arabic form of this word. We can precisely trace when it was firstly used by the earliest two lexicons that were discovered to bear the title al-Mu'ajjam or al-Mu'ajjam al-Kabir and al-Mu'ajjam al-Saghir by Ibn bint Munti, born in 214 AH. The prominence of the title came in 4th century of the Hijra. Few examples are al-Mu'ajjam al-Kabir wal-Saghir wal-Awsat في قراءة القرآن وأسماء by Ibn al-Hasan al-Musili, Mu'ajjam al-Shuyukh by Ibn Marzuq al-Baghdadi, and Mu'ajjam al-Sabah by Ibn Lal. You can be read this word better than me because you are the native speakers of Arabic. Camus became known with the production of Al-Fayruz Abadi work called Al-Qamus Al-Muhit, the White Ocean, but technically it denotes the comprehensive lexicon. Gradually, as time rolled on, Al-Mu'ajjam lost its currency, and finally Al-Qamus became more popular. Survivors are still used synonymously by scholars in the field. Here just you can mention to the important point of this paragraph. All of this, the examples are not very important. You should just refer to the important point as a whole. Origin of Arabic lexicon. In Arabic, we find a particularly clear picture of the process of experimentation. At first, vocabularies of limited scope and uncertain enrichment were written. The full dictionaries were written on an anagrammatical basis according to the artificial alphabetical order based on phonetic principles and separating roots according to their number of letters which they contained. Later, roots were listed in a rhymed order, that is, according to their final consonants. You know rhyme in Arabic poetry. It is remarkable that almost from the start, the compilers of Arabic dictionaries aimed at registering the complete vocabulary materials of the language. They were indeed almost obsessed by the copiousness of the language and were mathematically minded in this matter. In this, they differed from the early lexicographers of other nations, whose chief aim was to explain rare and difficult words. Arabic soon became the language of both religion and government, as Latin was in Western Europe during the Middle Ages. It was not surprising that general ignorance of the written language, the language of Quran and Hadith and the pre-Islamic poetry, was so often lamented, and that there was a crying need for both dictionaries and grammars. You as the native speaker of Arabic and a linguist of Arabic language, you should know about the origin of Arabic lexicon, and in your summarization you should mention it as a whole. You shouldn't, there isn't any need to mention the details of this about the origin of Arabic lexicon. There are three main types of lexicographical books. You should know these three types. The dictionary, the general classified vocabulary, and the short specialist vocabulary. In Arabic, we have three types of lexicographical book, which one of them is the dictionary, the general classified vocabulary, and the short specialist vocabulary. Arabs excelled in all the three. Arabic bilingual dictionaries were rare in the Arab world, the chief exception being al-Zamakhshari's Arabic-Persian dictionary. The general classified vocabulary, which might be described as a dictionary of synonyms, with its apogee of fullness and skills, with the Mukhassas of Ibn Sida, earlier effort being Ibn Qataybah's Adab al-Khatib, and Taha al-Ba'i's Fiqh al-Luqaf. In line with the submission of Ibn Khalikan, that nearly all Arab writers agree that Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, and that he owed his knowledge of grammar to Caliph Ali Abi Talib. In Al-Fihrist of Ibn al-Nadim, Muhammad ibn Ishaq said that overwhelming majority of scholars agree that grammar was taken from Al-Aswad, who took it from Ali ibn Abi Talib. This claim is justified by seeing an old manuscript consisting of a few pages on al-fa'il wal maf'ul, subject and object, in Medina, compiled by Aswad in handwriting of Yahya ibn Ya'mar, and countersigned by Alan and another Ibn Shumay. The rules of Arabic grammar were laid until the Umayyad period. when reports about Solecism were spread wide. For instance, a person called Saad let a horse pass Abu Aswad, who asked him why he was not riding. The farmer replied in Arabic by saying, "My horse is sturdy." You can see its Arabic counterparts. Mispronouncing the word Zalion, which means lame. Some of those present laughed, but Abu Aswad rebuked them, saying, okay, you can see its Arabic counterpart. These clients have a desire for Islam and have been converted for this reason. They have become our brothers, if only we were to lay down the rules of the language for them. He, Abu Aswad, prepared their section on subject and object for them. It is worth stating that the above blunder committed by Saad is not grammatical but phonological. Therefore, Abu Aswad didn't only write on syntactical topics mentioned earlier, but also included some linguistic lexicographical aspect in his notes. In addition, another source maintains the grammatical study was invented by Abu Aswad based on the fact that his son Abu Harb remarked that you can read the Arabic counterpart. The first section of the art of grammar composed by my father was on the verb of admiration. Because he heard his daughter committing solecism with fa'il al-ta'ajjub, the verb of admiration, it is reported that on a hot day she meant to say, "How strong is the heat?" But she made a grammatical mistake in vocalization, saying averting a nominative case to both words instead of a causative case, thus turning her statement into a question. What is the hottest kind of heat? Her father replied in Arabic thus, the intense heat of summer. You can read their Arabic counterparts. He then corrected her and laid down the rules of grammar. Though none of his works is extant, he is classed as a grammarian, not a lexicographer. As earlier mentioned, the studies started by him were divided into two separate sciences: Nahv, which means grammar, and Luqah, which means lexicography or philology. In both these twin subjects, a major work of genius was produced toward the end of 8th century. Al-Khalil's Kitab al-Ain in lexicography and Sibovey Kitab Fa'il Nahv for grammar. You should know this book. Their work didn't survive either, but they are said to have been noted for the knowledge of Qarib, rare expressions, especially those of Qurans. Here it is enough to say that whatever philological work was carried out before Al-Khalil's time largely took the form of the oral teaching, such of it as was written down was superseded by the Kitab Fil Nahv in grammar. This form of oral teaching, such of it as was written down, was superseded by Kitab Fa'il Nahv grammar. This works not only, I repeated two times, so sorry, not only finally separated Luqah from Nahv, they established the firms, the major works on these two subjects were to take. The arrangement of the material in Sibovey's Kitab was retained in the main by subsequent grammarians for 100 years, while Al-Khalil dictionary for was imitated by others for 2 centuries and was called Al-Khalil's method. You should know this matter. Kitab al-Ain is a landmark not only in Arabic lexicography but also in the history of world lexicography. Al-Khalil had achieved 2 things. He introduced the dictionary idea to the Arab world, and he propagated a deeper understanding of the nature of language. Al-Khalil adopted a means of listing the total vocabulary of the language and defining it. You can here read about the characteristics of Ibn al-Khalil book. He left room, however, for variation and modification without affecting the anagrammatical methods and the separation of fruit according to their lengths. Kitab al-Jamara of Ibn Durayd generally followed the steps of Kitab al-Ain, with the author's acknowledgement in the introduction, except for the arrangement of the chapters where Ibn Durayd has followed the ordinary alphabetical, not the phonetic sequence. He remained, however, loyal to the anagrammatical quantitative subdivision of the chapter. Kitab al-Tahdib of al-Ajari, not available in print, and Haywood even adopts the existence of the complete copy of it. He describes it as an able expansion of the Ain. It is often quoted by later lexicographers. Kitab al-Bari of al-Qalil has been reproduced in facsimile by A.S. Poulton of the British Museum, who speaks of it as having been in its day the most comprehensive Arabic lexicon that had yet appeared. It follows the entire arrangement of Al-Khalil. Kitab Mukhtasar al-Ain of al-Zubaydi, a universally praised abridgment of al-Ain. Muhit al-Luqa of Ibn Abbad seem to have started the habit of using metaphorical terms about sea in dictionary titles. It is entirely arranged after al-Ain. Kitab al-Muhkam of Ibn Sida, the last work to cling to al-Khalil arrangement even after the appearance and diffusion of al-Jawahiri arrangement. It is still a manuscript, but has been greatly praised as the greatest of the lexical works composed since the age of Siha, and it is held in very high estimation for its copiousness, its accuracy, and its examples from classical poets. Modern dictionary arrangement. The full honor for the introduction of the modern dictionary arrangement in Toto appears to have been reserved for a great scholar, al-Zamakhshari, who has accurately observed all the features of the modern alphabetical arrangement in his book entitled Asas al-Balagha, the basis of eloquence, in contrast to al-Jawahiri, who boasts proudly of having introduced an unprecedented arrangement. Al-Zamakhshari is satisfied by modestly pointing out in the introduction to his work that he has chosen for it the most known and the easiest arrangement, so that the person consulting it will fall upon his desire, finding it readily within easy reach. Also, Darwish unequivocally credit al-Zamakhshari as the first to perfect the modern alphabetical arrangement and apply it accurately in a large lexicon. By Haywood appears doubtful on this. The fact that al-Zamakhshari has written another lexical work called al-Fa'iq and the vocabulary of tradition, which in all probability was written prior to al-Asas, where he applied the modern arrangement only imperfectly, indicates that it was al-Zamakhshari who, through his own personal experience, perfected this modern arrangement and put it to accurate application. Haywood has discovered the imperfect application of the modern arrangement in Al-Fa'i, which he describes as: the work is divided into 28 books containing words beginning with the various letters from Hamza to Ya. Within these books, words are arranged in chapters according to the second letter of the roots. But in these chapters, the arrangement is either haphazard or in accordance with some principle of which we are not aware. We could assure him that it is haphazard simply because the genius of Al-Zamakhshari was still experimenting in order to perfect the new arrangement, a perfection which he actually reaches in his other work Al-Asas. It is not at all without justification that this modern alphabetical arrangement should be called Al-Zamakhshari's arrangement. Indeed, it was when introduced some modern that it has never in Arabic again been put to application till modern times. The tide of medieval Arabic lexicography went on, favoring Al-Jawahiri arrangement mostly and Al-Khalil occasionally. But it was not only the arrangement of Al-Asas that for many generations looked too revolutionary to be followed and hence remained unique. The whole of Al-Zamakhshari conception of the dictionary seems to be original and entirely different from the traditional conception, which still holds favor up to his day in spite of occasional verbal vibration against it. It has been agreed up from the time of Ibn Khaldun down to that of Haywood, including all authorities in between, that Al-Zamakhshari's Asas is different from all the other Arabic lexicon in that it explains all the words used metaphorically by Arabic and what meaning are used metaphorically by them. It comprises a very large collection of topical signification as well as otherwise. It is based on the basic idea of distinguishing between original and figurative signification of words. It is compiled with a special aim to distinguish between the literal use of words and the metaphorical hadith, haqiqa and majaz. We find that Al-Zamakhshari has introduced the following revolutionary features. You should mention such features as brief. Okay. We find that Al-Zamakhshari has introduced the following revolutionary features. You should mention these features in brief, as I told you. Al-Zamakhshari has applied thoroughly the inductive method in collecting his lexical data, resorting to the actual literature, both spoken and written. This is an entirely different approach from the traditional attitude of merely relying on early lexicons, an attitude which is unfortunately current in Arabic lexicography since the death of Al-Khalil down to our own days. Here, no doubt, Al-Zamakhshari is setting an example of any modern ambitious lexicographer. He has taken great pains to stress the importance of explaining words in their context, not out and isolated, and it has been the habit of Arabic lexicographers before and after Al-Zamakhshari down to the present moment. If the modern Western linguists take pride in discovering the importance of what they call the context of situation, they ought to know that an Arab philologist of Persian origin has instead on it somewhere about 8 centuries ago. Although he sounds annoyed by the trivial practice of his fellow philologists, he is too discreet to criticize them openly by his assistants on consideration the words in their context. He is again setting another example to the modern lexicographer. He has broken with a myth which still has a strong hold over Arabic lexicographers and philologists up till now. of strictly confining pure Arabic to certain space in time and place. In appreciation of this feature of Al-Zamakhshari, Haywood says, the author almost regards words as living organisms with lives, after on which were affected by the use made of them, especially by writers of genius, so made a point of quoting late authors, including those of his time. Al-Zamakhshari has freed himself from the yoke of the stereotyped definition of words, unlike heard of Arabic lexicographers between Al-Khalil and our own days. It must now be clear, therefore, that revolutionary lexicographical features planned and actually performed by Al-Zamakhshari regarding the collection of lexical data, their arrangement, presentation, and definition coincide with ideal the modern Arabic lexicographer should aspire to. In all these features, Al-Zamakhshari has been almost unique. Only two features detract from Al-Zamakhshari's standing as the perfect model to the modern Arabic lexicographer. He was too selective and ought to have been more comprehensive. He didn't have any notion at all of a comparative historical approach, although it had been introduced by Hebrew lexicographer in the Arab world. His excuse for the first is his love for the literary language, because in his opinion it was only this type that contributes to the understanding of the Qurans and tradition, which was the final aim of linguist studies. As for the second, Al-Zamakhshari lacked any knowledge of any the semiotic languages. Had he known the second, Al-Zamakhshari lacked any knowledge of any semiotic language. Had he known, as we are sure, the comparative historical approach would have almost imposed itself upon him. But this advantage was only enjoyed by the Jewish scholars in the medieval Arab world and has been utilized only for the benefit of the Hebrew. I repeat this line 2 times. Again, historians of Arabic lexicography tend to evaluate usually only al-Asas and occasionally al-Fa'iq as the lexicographical work of Al-Zamakhshari. We should not approach the question in this manner. Instead, we should try to evaluate Al-Zamakhshari as lexicographer wherever his lexicographical skills are shown. Thus, we should not confine ourselves to his direct lexical work, but include also his indirect contribution to Arabic lexicography, especially in work like Al-Kashaf, where a great deal of Al-Zamakhshari's lexical originalities are obvious. Indeed, we are convinced that Al-Zamakhshari was quite conscious of the basic source material for the traditional Arabic lexicon, namely the Quran, the Prophet tradition, and the secular classical Arabic literature. He aimed at exhausting them all, but separately, not in one lexicon. Thus, he dealt with the vocabulary of Al-Quran in his book Al-Kashaf, of the Prophet tradition in Al-Fa'iq, and finally that of the secular classical literature in Al-Asas. That is why he hardly made direct quotation from the Qurans or a tradition in Al-Asas. To provide the last element of the major lexicon, he compiled his geographical dictionary called Al-Jibal wal-Miyah wal-Amkina, the mountain, waters, and places, lexical work which Darwish doesn't mention at all, while Haywood just gives its name, admitting that he had not taken any trouble to see it. This book is divided into alphabetical chapters, but within each chapter the material is listed at random, another indication that it has been written before Al-Zamakhshari perfected his arrangement. We wish that someone would piece together all this lexical contribution of Al-Zamakhshari in one lexicon. Such a work will be a big step toward realization Arabic ideal lexicon on the one hand, and a better appreciation of Al-Zamakhshari lexicography in the other. Lexicon compiled according to the modern alphabetical arrangement are coming out now in numbers from cultural capital of Arab world, especially Cairo and Beirut. When compare Arabic lexicon with what had been done by other peoples previously and what has been done since in Europe, we are bound to say that Arabic lexicon is a monument to thought and industry, deserving the highest praise. And we could conclude in John Haywood's word, only people with a very high standard of culture and extensive literature could require a lisan and qamus, and only truly outstanding scholars could provide them. Without them and the other dictionaries we have discussed, much Arabic literature would have remained imperfectly understood even by the Arabs themselves. Without them, many facts concerning Islam would have been severely handicapped. One would think that the Arab treatment was ideally suited to the work of lexicography. Please read this article and just summarize it in 2 pages, not more. And you should mention the important matters. You shouldn't mention the details because they are not important. Please summarize it in about 2 pages. And don't write the details about this, about the Arabic lexicography. And ask me your question through the WhatsApp group.